Sounds great. All right, good morning, everyone. We'll call to order the February 1st Des Moines Area Metropolitan Planning Organization Transportation Technical Committee. And so we'll start right off looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
Mr. Rudy, I'll move approval.
Thanks, Rudy.
Second.
Jeff May, second.
Whoop, I didn't catch that one. Sorry, did you?
Jeff May, second.
Thanks, Jeff. All right, we got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this motion or the agenda? Yeah, as the typical spiel, we're doing this meeting online, so we're not gonna have everyone unmute and say aye. We'll just ask anyone who's opposed to the motion to speak up. So is anyone opposed to the motion? Okay, hearing none, that motion carries. All right, next we're looking for an approval of the meeting minutes for January 4th. A motion and second for that, please.
So moved, John Dostart.
Thanks, John.
Second, Miller.
Thanks, Mark. All right. We got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the minutes?
Who was the second? I'm sorry.
Sorry, Mark Miller.
Thank you.
All right. Hearing no discussion, is there anyone opposed to the motion? Okay, hearing none, that motion carries. Thank you, Tracy, for getting that posted together. All right, item number 4 is the report and a vote of the election of calendar year 2024 officers. I would like to thank Mark Miller, Eric Peterson, and Mike Ludwig for being on the 2024 nominating committee. And so I don't know, one of our nominating committee, would you care to make nominations? Let's see, we got them posted too.
Yep, so this is Mark Miller with the city of Ankeny. So we like to move forward with nominating Luis Montoya with Dart as the chair. And then John Dostart, the city of Altoona, as the vice chair.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it. All right. Dylan, do you have any comments on this process or? Oh, okay. All right, we got a nomination for Luis Montoya with Dart and John Dostart, city engineer for the city of Altoona. Any comments or questions?
I'll just chime in to say that I'm very grateful for the nomination and look forward to serving, and very much appreciate your service, Steve, and big shoes to fill. Thank you.
Thanks, Luis. Appreciate that. Thank you. All right. John, do you accept your nomination as well?
I'll accept the nomination as well, and I appreciate the confidence of the committee. And likewise, same comments that Louise echoed. Great leadership, Steve. Thank you.
Appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Can I get a motion to approve our 2024 chair as Luis Montoya and our 2024 vice chair is John Dostart?
So moved, Jeff May.
Thank you, Jeff.
Second, Rudy Casper.
Thanks, Rudy. All right, we got a motion on the table. Or any discussion or comments? Okay, is anyone opposed to the motion? Okay, hearing none. Congrats, Luis and John. I appreciate you both stepping up. So, and I'd like to point out, I guess I may go down in history as the only chair to never show up to the MPO during his term, right? Is that right? Thanks to our COVID kicking us virtually. So, right. But thanks everybody. It's been a joy being the chair, and I appreciate it. All the help with staff, especially in doing this, and I appreciate you all your participation. So, That being said, we'll move to the next item. I'll finish out the meeting and then Luis will take it with the March meeting. So. All right, brings us to item 5. Report and a vote on the Iowa DOT 2020 to 2024 safety performance targets. Z, are you able to talk to this one, please?
Yep, thank you. So every year, the Federal Highway Administration has the Highway Safety Improvement Program, which requires state DOTs and MPOs to report and adopt safety performance measures. So last month, we brought the Iowa DOT's 2020 to 2024 safety targets for your review. And now this month, we bring them back to you for consideration of approval. There are no penalties for the MPO if we do not meet or make progress towards these targets. Staff recommends approval of the DOT's safety targets.
All right, are there any questions for Z on this? All right, and Z is looking for a motion for approving these targets. I got a motion and a second, please.
This is Luis. I'll move it.
Thanks, Luis.
It's Rudy, I'll second.
Thanks, Rudy. All right, we got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All right, is anyone opposed to the motion? Okay, hearing none, that motion carries. All right, that brings us to item 6, a report and optional vote on mobilizing tomorrow employment, housing unit, and population projections. Zach, are you able to talk to this one, please?
Yes, thank you, Steve. Staff has developed the draft employment and housing unit projections for the LRTP. And really, ultimately, the purpose of these projections is to feed into our growth scenario, which then goes into the model, which then helps us determine where the needs are across the region for transportation improvements. Staff used the same methodology that we used in the previous plan update with a few minor tweaks. Woods and pool was what we used as our control totals for the region. It's the same thing that we used last plan update as well. And then we have shared these projections with the Iowa DOT, and they have reviewed them, and they didn't have any issues with the methodology or the numbers. On the next slide, I think we start getting into how we developed the employment projections. We did attach a document to the agenda that gives a little bit more detail and background as to how this methodology was put together. But we did determine the employment projections based on using a parcel-based methodology. This takes the parcels, it takes square footage of buildings, and then has different factors for different types of land uses, and allows us to determine some employment numbers for those parcels. As I mentioned, we used Woods and Pool to help us with our base year. The parcels had a certain number of employment in them, and then we used Woods and Pool to add an adjustment factor in there to increase those numbers a little bit to bring them up to what Woods and Pool was showing for employment in the 4-county region around Des Moines. We used the Woods and Pool then to develop growth rates that we could then use to make the projections for employment out into the future. Next slide, please. So on the screen before you now is a table that shows those employment growth projections. You can see we have the base year employment there. That was from the parcel-based methodology. And then we have the 2020 adjustment factor, which we used Woods and Pool to determine that. And then you can see in each year, you've got the total employment for each member government listed there going out to 2050. And then that final column there on the right shows you the total growth in employment that each community has over the plan period, so out to the year 2050. On the next slide, I think we start getting into, so employment projections, we had a gain in the region of a little over 140,000 jobs out to 2050. Housing unit projections, they're done a little bit differently. We use census data to determine the growth rate for each of the member governments. We then take those member governments, we look at what that median growth rate was, and anybody that was above that median growth rate was considered a high growth community. Anybody below it was considered a low growth community. And then we use that basically then to determine how growth kind of tapers off over time. The reason for that is that if we used just the growth rate that we're seeing over the last 20 years and projected it out to 2050, I believe we were ending up with, a regional population well over 2 million people. And we just didn't really feel like that was probably realistic. And so we had to kind of taper that down. And just in general, that's kind of what we see a trend in communities, is that over time you kind of generally taper off. So that's how we approached the housing unit projections. Again, that's the same methodology that we used last time. Really, the only difference is that we used updated census data. So this table on the screen before you now shows each community's growth rate from the 2020 census to the 2000 census to the 2020 census. The growth that was experienced in each period and what rate we used in each period. And just as an example, you can see Altoona there at the top had a 3.58% growth rate. Their growth number for 2025 to 29 was 1,514 per year. And then their growth rate in 2030 through 2039 is also 3.58. And then it tapers off in that last out year of 2040 through 2050 to 1.27. So that kind of shows you how we approached the housing growth rates for the growth scenario. And again, same methodology that we used last time. The only change we made was to update the growth rates based on census data. Next slide, please. So this just shows you the base year housing units, then how many housing units each community has in each of the years going out, 2030, 2035, all the way to 2050, and then the total growth in housing units for each community over the plan period, with a total growth in housing units of a little over 100,000 over that period. Next slide. We also, as part of this, do a population projection. This is not something that we use as part of the growth scenario. It's really just something, it's easier, I think, for people to understand population as opposed to housing units and things like that. So we do a population projection as well. And the way we determine this is that we take the housing unit projections that we have, and then we apply household size and vacancy rates from the census to those housing unit projections. And that allows us to then determine a base year population, then to project that population out. And I think on the next slide, there is a table that shows those rates. You can see, again, going out to 2050, it shows what our base year population is, and then the population for each community in each of those out years. And we're projecting a total population for the region by 2050 of a little over 850,000. This lines up well with what Woods and Pool is showing for the 4-county region. So we feel comfortable with that number. And as I mentioned before, we are encouraged by Federal Highway and the DOT to kind of have some constraints on what we're looking at as far as, housing unit and population employment goes. And the Woods and Pool is what we used to kind of help us stay within those constraints. Next slide. So as far as next steps go, this is on the agenda this month as an optional vote. If everyone's comfortable with it, we can move forward with that vote. If people would like a little bit more time to review, we can also take that time and take some comments at the end of the month if you would feel more comfortable doing that. These numbers, as I mentioned earlier, will be used to populate the growth scenario. That's kind of one of our next big steps in the long-range plan development process. Staff will send out to each member government the projections that we shared with you, their individual projections, along with a GIS file of the TAZs and allow you to then populate those TAZs for each time period as you see fit for how you see growth happening in your community. And then we'll ultimately use those, we'll collect those GIS files back from each member government, compile them all together, and then eventually it'll all feed into our transportation demand model. I think that's my last slide. Happy to take any questions if anybody has any on the employment housing projections.
Zach?
Thanks, Zach.
This is
Yeah.
John Dostard. Could we get the TAZ file, I guess, before we vote on that? Is that what you're thinking, or do we need to vote on this and then get the TAZ? I kind of want to have a chance to run this by our planners to see if they think the model's off for like the Altoona and Eastern Polk County area.
Are you wanting to see? Are you wanting to possibly change the TAZs? You mean?
I guess what is that? I guess when you say TAZ, what is that?
Okay, they're the transportation analysis zones. So it's just a geography that's, it's larger than a census, a parcel, for example, larger than a parcel. It's usually made up of, if you don't mind jumping in here, what would we say the average size of the TAZ is?
It's probably several block groups, or so, a bit less than the census tracts.
Okay, I'm not sure if we want to change those, but I just want to have a chance for our planners to take a look at those numbers and see if they're matching up with what we think they should be.
So you're talking about the projections then?
Correct.
Okay. Well, I think if that's what the committee would like to do, then we're fine with allowing the committee to have some time to look at these numbers a little more closely before we actually move forward with a vote. If that's what you're suggesting.
Well, that's
John.
what I'm saying. I don't know what the committee's saying though. So
Yeah, this is
Yeah, I
Rudy.
agree. I'd like to run this by our planners too, for a planning department before we give you the final blessing, if that's possible.
Nope, that's fine. So I'd say let's take till the end of the month maybe for the everyone to review these numbers a little bit more closely, and then if there's no issues, we can move forward with them.
just send comments to you, Zach.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you.
And Zach, and I apologize, maybe I missed it, but for example, I guess just to call out, when I look at like the populations and say just using Waukee, for example, the populations continue to go up, but then in the housing one, you level off the housing units. Maybe I'm not understanding why that would be. They have an 8% growth in the housing unit projections, and then it levels off to 2 and then down to 1, but then yet the population keeps going up.
So they should both keep going up. Nobody really goes down. We use the housing units to determine what the populations would be. So as long as the housing units are going up, the population should be going up as well. Because we just used, to go back to that, we took our housing units that we had projected, and then we applied the vacancy rates and average household size for each of those communities to those housing unit projections to then determine the population projections. So for someone like Waukee, whose growth rate, their growth rate's tapering off from a housing unit perspective, because if we kept it at 8.6% all the way out to 2050, like I mentioned earlier, what we see is a very high number of housing units and then population at the end of 2050. Like I said, it was over like 2 million population, I think. I suppose if the committee feels like that's an actual reality that could happen, we could circle back and review that and talk with the DOT and Federal Highway and see what their comfort level is with that. But how we've always done it in the past is we've had to have that kind of that constraint on it that the DOT and Federal Highway have wanted to see. And, we chose the Woods and Pool, and that's, to keep us kind of in what Woods and Pool was showing for housing and for population for the out to 2050. We had to stay kind of in that 850 range, if that makes sense.
Well, that helps. And I'm not saying change it. I just was trying to understand how the correlation between the two. And I mean, I guess when I look at the table, it does say the first column for the housing units is growth rate 25 to 29. And so really you're saying that correlates with the so I was trying to see how it correlates with the population table. What is the base year in the population table again?
2020.
Okay, 2020. Okay.
I think maybe part of the confusion is if you look at the document that was included in the agenda packet, I think what we're showing here in terms of housing units is only showing the growth in the housing units. And so those do taper off over time. If you look at total housing units, they continue to go up, and then that rate matches what the population figure is as well.
Okay. That's what could be. Yeah, it could be just the way I'm looking at the documents on the screen. Okay. Well, I think, I mean, unless others have different opinions, I think I hear clearly that we want folks to kind of take a look at this and digest this data and have others on their teams digest it as well. So unless I hear differently, Zach, you're okay. You said we'll take comments to the end of the month and then bring it back in the March meeting. So
no, that works for us.
Okay.
Hey, good. Steve, this is Mark Miller with the City of Ankeny. Where did the employment information come from? Employment projections come from, Zach?
It came from the parcels. So we got information from the counties as far as what kind of buildings were located in different parcels. And then we took those buildings and applied a factor to them, depending on what the land use was in that parcel, to develop the kind of the base year employment numbers. Now, those employment numbers did not match up with what Woods and Pool had for the 2020 employment for the region. And so what we did is we did that adjustment factor where we, took that additional growth that Woods and Pool was showing and then applied it to each of the communities across the region to get up to what Woods and Pool was showing for 2020. And then we used the Woods and Pool growth rates to then project those figures out into the future.
Okay. Yeah, we're going to want to, we'll want to take a look at this here internally at Ankeny.
Good. All right. If anybody has follow-up questions, comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to Zach and if you could take this, we'll take some time to review this. So, all right. Thank you, Zach.
Thank you.
Okay. That brings us to item 7, a report on federal fiscal year 2028 surface transportation block grant applications. Zach, you're also able to talk to this one too, please.
Yes, so we've received the applications for the 2020 surface transportation block grant. This is just the STBG projects. Carl will cover the TAP projects here in just a minute. But you can see that we received 16 applications. They're listed on the screen there in front of you. We have a total request this year of $28.6 million. We don't know our exact target yet. We should receive that from the DOT sometime this month. But it will probably be around $16 million. So we definitely have more in requests than we do to award, which is typical. Please take a look over this list, and if you do not see a project that is supposed to be on there, please let us know and we can get that corrected. The presentations on the next slide there You can see that we've got those scheduled for March 20th. Please get those or get that date on your calendar. It'll be from approximately 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. We will be doing these in person this year. We haven't done them in person for a few years, but we are going back to doing these presentations in person there at the MPO office on March 20th. And I think that's all I have. If you have any questions about the projects or the presentation workshop, I'd be happy to take those at this time.
Thanks, Zach. Any questions for Zach? Okay, hearing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, brings us to item 9. I'm sorry, item 8, a report on the 2028 Surface Transportation Block Grant Transportation Alternatives Program applications. Carl, are you able to talk to that one, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Zach promised, the TAP applications are posted in front of you. We received 10 applications this year for a total of $5.3 million. We have a target of about $2.6 million in funding. So again, received more in requests than what we have available. So we will be also please take a look, and if your project isn't listed for some reason, we can get that corrected, but I believe they're all there. We do have a schedule, next slide, for presentations set up during the same STBG timeframe that for just the regular STBG dollars on March 20th from 2 to 4 in-person presentations for those. So happy to take any questions that you might have at this time.
Thanks, Carl. Any questions for Carl? All right, thank you, Carl. All right, that takes us to item number 9, a report on fiscal year 2025 Unified Planning Work Program and Budget Development. Dylan, are you able to talk to that one?
Yeah, I can do that. So we're working on the update for the work program, which gets into our activities that we're going to do over the next year, as well as the budget side of those activities. For those of you that aren't familiar, we work on a state fiscal year basis, so July 1st to June 30th. In terms of timing of this, we'll have a draft before you next month that shows you all the details. That has to be submitted to the DOT by April 1st. So next month will be the approval on the draft. And then we'll come back in May with the final that incorporates any comments from the communities as well as the DOT, so that we can get that turned in by the end of by June 1st, so that it all takes place July 1st. In terms of the MPO's work program, there's certain requirements that we have to meet that are outlined in US code, and those are the basic foundational things that the MPO has to do, like the long range plan, the TIP, the work program itself, allocating funding to the communities and so forth with SDBG funds. Those are the core things. If you go to the next slide, there's always a couple of emphasis areas that US DOT wants to see as well. These haven't changed in the last couple of years, and we're usually pretty good about meeting these just through our basic, activities that we work on every year. Last month, we asked for feedback from the communities of what you want to see in terms of additional plans, studies, and so forth. We didn't receive anything from any of the communities, so we want to give more time in case there are some things. I know Dart, Tony's reached out and said that they have some things coming to us. So I know that there's some of that will be coming, and that's fine if there's nothing that anybody wants to see, but we just want to make sure that opportunity is available for you. Otherwise, we'll put some ideas forward. And if you go to the next slide, we'll talk about some of the things that we see coming over the next year. And again, some of these are kind of the basic foundational stuff, but there's a few special projects in there that will continue. So as Zach just explained, we're working on the long range plan right now. That plan is due at the end of due in November of this year. So we'll continue on that. That'll be completed in the next fiscal year. We're also doing the same thing with the Comprehensive Safety Action Plan with the Safe Streets for All funding that we received. That'll also continue into next fiscal year. We've been working for several years on the Purple Log Highway, Iowa 5, US 5 interstate designation, so that work will continue. So will our work on the data bike, pavement collection, trail counts, all of those sorts of things. One thing that we're starting to look into with the long range transportation plan and how it relates to grant opportunities with the infrastructure bill, with our SDBG funds, is just a more targeted strategy for how we go about federal funding opportunities and how they align with the long range plan and with the funding that the MPO controls. So that's something that you'll see that's probably a little new. The other thing that we've talked about at this committee in the last, in the recent past, is some sort of transportation data, whether it's streetlight data is one vendor we've looked at. We've looked at a couple other vendors. We did the survey to the community or to the tech committee. We've done that twice now, and we didn't get a lot of responses. I think we got 3 responses. Those we did receive said they like the idea of streetlight. Staff thinks that streetlight would be a good thing to pursue as well. So we do have that in. I think right now in the draft that I'm looking at for the budget, we do have that in there. However, a lot of the budget will be finalized in the next several weeks, and we'll talk about this later in the agenda. But once the director position has been filled and we know what's going on with that, that'll kind of affect some things in terms of the capacity that we have in the budget. So that could stay in, that could come out. We don't quite know yet. So I've got a little asterisk on there right now. That's what we have for you today. If there's any questions about the projects, if there's, like I said, there's still time to get us ideas that you might want to see. There's time to do that. Otherwise, we'll come back to you next month with a more robust, fully formed draft report or draft budget and work program for you to review. We'll try to get that out sooner rather than later because it's a pretty big document to dig through and everything. But know that we have several months to still work on this. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. Otherwise, that's what we have for you today.
Thanks, Dylan. And just to clear, the streetlight data would that be something that's available to all communities to use in the
Yes.
MPO?
Yeah, thank you. That is one of the benefits of that streetlight data is that if the MPO were to be the main license holder, we can then grant access to that for all the MPO communities. And then you in turn can give that access to your consultants or what have you as well. So it'd be a nice value add for being an MPO member. And then we can take a year and see if people like it, if they use it, if they have questions. It's kind of hard to say in concept whether this is a good thing. People will get use out of it, but this way we just put it in your hands, get use out of it, and then we can address, do we keep this in the following years?
Okay. Yeah, I can tell you from my own opinion, that would be fantastic to have that access to that type of data, traffic data on every street would be amazing for questions on we get on stop sign, requests for stop signs or whatever traffic studies people may be doing. But so, any other questions for Dylan? Okay, hearing none. Thanks, Dylan. All right, it brings us to item 10. This is a report on the DC list. Gunnar, are you able to talk to this one, please?
Gladly, thanks, Steve. It's that time of year where we start getting ready for the trip to Washington, D.C. with the Greater Des Moines Partnership, and we like to come with a list of projects in hand that you all have asks in that we can lobby our delegation to help to fund. So what we're kicking off today is the development of what we call our DC list. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you a link in the chat right now. Oops, wrong button. Try that. There you go. On the screen here is a screenshot from last year's list. I don't expect you to be able to read that too clearly, but if you use the link in the chat, you can see what we had in that list last year. You should be able to edit within that. It's just a Google Doc, and I would ask any projects that you have that are seeking federal funding, if you would update, project description, funding amount, funding program, etc. We would appreciate that. We are asking to have this information back in a couple of weeks, if that's possible. We're trying to get it all in front of the partnerships board. They generally approve the their entire federal policy agenda in late February. We do also understand that there's going to be some federal asks that aren't finalized yet, specifically the community project funding. Our delegation doesn't have direction or guidance on this round of funding. We're anticipating having that in March. So if you're planning on submitting projects for community project funding, we would suggest that you include them in our DC list, understanding that they may not make the selection from our congressional delegations. While I'm on that note, we have been in contact with our congressional delegation offices, and we're thinking at least Tony Chavez from Congressman Nunn's office will be with us for TTC in March. And we're hoping, fingers crossed, that they will have guidance by then that he'll be able to share with you all. They do invite you to send projects and ideas early if you want to, just understanding that they don't have their guidance just yet. That's what I have for you. We'll be sure to include the link to the Google form in the post-meeting email. I'd be happy to take any questions you might have.
Thanks, Gunnar. And just to clarify, you want us to actually edit right in that Excel?
Yeah, I think that's going to be the easiest approach here. You can see what's in there already and put it directly in there if you want to. Alternatively, you feel free to email me as well.
Okay, sounds good. All right, any questions for Gunnar? All right, please make sure you grab that chat link there. I'll take you right to open up the Excel document there. So it's in the chat, please. All right, brings us to next item, number 11, update on the executive director search. Gunnar, are you able to talk to that as well, please?
Happy to do so. This process continues to move along on schedule, and it's an aggressive timeline. You all recall that the MPO hired To the Top and Deibler and Company to lead the search process. And you all responded to a survey that helped guide that process. Since we updated you last, the announcement of the position opening was posted on January 8th. It was held open for 3 weeks and closed on January 26th. During that time, there was widespread advertising of the position. I hope you all saw it. So to carry through the rest of our timeline here, next major steps are on Monday, the search committee will meet to review the applications, and they will then push forward finalists. Those finalists are going to be scheduled for interviews on February 15th. That is the same day as the policy committee meeting. And if that were, the search committee will have the opportunity to recommend a candidate, an initial proposal to this policy committee on the 15th. And then the policy committee would have the option to move forward with the candidate at that time. And if they do choose to do so, then they would enter contract negotiations. And we're anticipating that the next executive director could be in place by early April. So be happy to take any questions you might have.
Gunnar, any questions for Gunnar? All right, hearing none. Thanks for the update, Gunnar.
Thank you.
All right, brings us to item 12, a report on upcoming events. Z, are you able to talk to that one, please?
Yep, thank you. Next slide, please. Yep, thank you. So we have a list of webinars and upcoming events in your agenda packet, but we're also highlighting some upcoming webinars and events. Of note, on February 8th, City of Des Moines Parks and Rec will be giving a webinar on their systematic analysis and management of their trail system. And also APA Iowa will have a planning on tap session on Denver's e-bike rebate program. Please have a look at these upcoming webinars and events, and happy to take any questions you might have.
And Z, any questions for any of these? Okay, hearing none. Thank you, Z. All right, brings us to item 13, other non-action items of interest to the committee.
I have one quick one, Steve. Given that we have new appointments this time of year, just want to remind everyone that we recently integrated a new system for delivering all of our agendas. It's through GovDelivery. I know some of the jurisdictions in the region use that also. We've made every effort to make sure that that list is updated and accurate, but I just wanted to invite you to go in and review your subscriptions. It's pretty easy to find, dmampo.org/subscribe. You should also be able to find a link just going to our homepage. So just want to make sure you know where to go to control your subscriptions, make sure you're getting materials. And if you're having any issues, please reach out to me and we'll make sure that it gets addressed.
Thanks, Gunnar. Any questions on this? All right, thank you. Any other items?
I've got one, Steve. Just a quick reminder to everybody that staff sent out the LRTP project solicitation back on January 23rd. We did send that through that Gov delivery system that Gunnar was just talking about. So if you were not subscribed to the technical committee list on that, you may not have received it. So if you did not receive that email, please let me know as soon as possible, and I can get you all the information you need to be able to submit your projects for the LRTP.
Thank you, Zach. Any questions for Zach on this? All right, thanks, Zach. Please remember to get those in by the end of this month. So thank you. All right, any other items?
Steve, I've got one more real quick. As Zach and Gunnar both mentioned, we do have new representatives. So I just want to put out a call if anybody that's new or even anybody that's been on the committee for a while wants to sit down with staff, get a better understanding of what the MPO is, what is expected of you as a tech representative or anything like that, please reach out to me and we're happy to come sit down with you and make sure that you're understanding what this committee is all about and what the MPO is all about.
Thanks, Dylan. I appreciate that. Thank you. So. All right, any other items? All right, hearing none, that brings us to item 14. Our next meeting date is March 7th, 2024, usual time and place, 9:30. All right, and then brings us to item 15. We'll consider this motion adjourned. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day.
Steve.